We haven't done one of these in a while. It's on the new set too. That's pretty cool. I'm Josh, and this is everything you ever wanted to know about the Punisher, but were afraid to ask. I was on vacation last week, so this is going to be a quick one. Here on EYEWTKATP, BWATA, we talk about movies and comic books and movies about comic books, and today we're going to talk about something no one on YouTube seems to talk about, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. With Avengers Endgame out on home media, it's the perfect time for some binge viewing of the world's most expensive television show, and this is one way to watch them. It's important to note that there's no wrong way to watch these movies. If you watch them and enjoy them, then you're doing it right. This is just one way to plow through the franchise. We're going to be looking at just the movies here. We won't look at any of the television shows, no matter how much I love the Marvel Netflix series. We'll touch on some of the one-shot shorts included in the early Blu-rays, but they're really optional. We're also going to pay very little attention to post and mid-credit scenes in the films, though I'll make notes of them. As they went on, they became less and less relevant, so feel free to skip them once you're halfway through or so, until close to the end when they become relevant again. The easiest way to watch these movies is in the order they were released, which is a perfectly acceptable viewing order since it's the way they were mostly intended to be viewed, each building on the movies that came before it. Alternatively, you could look at the official timeline of the films released by Marvel and Disney and watch them in the order that they take place. This can be a little confusing though, since the timeline's pretty wonky, even if you ignore that 8 years later thing in Homecoming. Reddit user Germstrom, proposed a viewing order that's a bit of a blend of both, with a special note taken to the themes and storylines of the films. Various blogs and websites have reported their own thoughts on the order with tweaks and touches. This is my take on the thematic order, and it's absolutely the way I will be binging the MCU next. To kick things off, we have the prelude, The Two Captains. For this, we watch Captain America the First Avenger and Captain Marvel. We skip the bookend segments of Captain America, the modern scenes. We'll come to them later. We also ignore the end credits scene from Captain Marvel since it will make zero sense here. These films work to set up the themes and concepts and characters that will dominate the MCU in the films to come. They establish the SSR, which then becomes S.H.I.E.L.D., as well as the threats that lurk both on Earth and in the cosmos. We also get to see the Tesseract at work, which will drive the action for our next part. Segue to Part 1, Avengers Assemble. For this, we deviate from the release order and watch Iron Man, Iron Man 2, Incredible Hulk, Thor, and the Avengers. We play with the viewing order a little bit by skipping the end scene from Incredible Hulk and watching it as part of the one-shot The Consultant, which we watch between Iron Man 2 and Thor. The end credit scene from Iron Man 2 works best if placed just after The Consultant. We now watch the bookend scenes from Captain America between Thor and the Avengers. If you're so inclined, you can add the Hulk in the Arctic deleted scene from the Incredible Hulk to the beginning of the Captain America bookends. It makes for a neat little one-shot on its own. Watching the Phase 1 films in this order adheres mostly to the chronology, but it makes sure that the themes and storylines about Phil Coulson and Nick Fury's arc of working to bring together the Avengers for S.H.I.E.L.D. is logical. Events flow fairly smoothly with one series of events flowing into the next, as long as you keep in mind that some of them are happening concurrently, such as the events of Iron Man 2 and the Incredible Hulk, and parts of Iron Man 2 happening just before the events of Thor. We see an escalation of the threats presented during the prelude, and the team comes together organically, but we also see why they're working together is a tenuous symmetry. This brings us to Part 2, which is split into two segments. The team has come together, faced a major threat, and now go their separate ways. Their alliance was shaky at best, and they're still struggling to trust each other, so they aren't likely to call on the other Avengers when threats present themselves. This segment diverges from the release order of the films in favor of the chronological and thematic order. First off, though, we follow Thor and Loki into the cosmic side of the MCU in Part 2, Somewhere in the Universe, with Thor the Dark World, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. This gives us more about the plight of the Asgardians and introduces us to a merry band of misfits that set the tone for all of the cosmic adventures to follow. We also see the wider threat presented by Thanos, though he remains a mysterious force moving through the galaxy, leaving only destruction in his wake. End credit scenes all flow nicely from one film to the next, informing the minor events that happen between films, though the Adam Warlock tease from Guardians 2 doesn't go anywhere and can be ignored. We're also introduced to the Infinity Stones and learn of their immense power, which we will come back to later. Up next is Part 2, Meanwhile on Earth. Here we watch Iron Man 3, Captain America the Winter Soldier, and Avengers Age of Ultron. We also insert the one-shot All Hail the King between Winter Soldier and Age of Ultron. The end credit scene from Iron Man 3 is fun, but it doesn't really go anywhere, and the end scene from Age of Ultron should be completely ignored. Here we see the after effects of Loki's menace from the Avengers. Tony Stark is suffering from PTSD from the absolutely mind-shattering scale of the events that occurred, while Cap is struggling to accept the realities of the world he now inhabits and Shield's moral ambiguity. It's easy to see that Iron Man 3 and Winter Soldier happen, if not concurrently, then close enough to one another that the hesitant alliance between Cap and Tony Stark from the Avengers isn't strong enough for them to call upon one another despite the scale of the events involved. With their worldviews cracked, the team is strong enough to come together to reassemble to take on the remnants of Hydra in Age of Ultron. When we understand where Cap and Stark are coming from, it's easy to understand the creation of Ultron and then the schism that begins to emerge between the two Avengers and will lead to the inevitable collapse of the team. Part 3, Avengers Disassemble. It's here that all of the tensions from the previous films come to a head. We watch the films Ant-Man, Captain America Civil War, Black Panther, Spider-Man Homecoming, Doctor Strange, Thor Ragnarok, and Ant-Man and the Wasp. The end credit scene from Ant-Man can be skipped since it's unnecessary and redundant. Civil War offers up a segue that puts different players in place for future movies. Black Panther continues that segue. Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, and Ragnarok are largely unnecessary, and Ant-Man and the Wasp, however, is essential. These films grow the roster of heroes, but also show the consequences of the events that led us here. Ant-Man starts small, pun intended, but we quickly escalate to the final fracture of the team in Captain America Civil War. This dovetails smoothly into the events of Black Panther and Spider-Man Homecoming, which happen concurrently with Doctor Strange. From the introduction of magic in the MCU in Doctor Strange, we move smoothly back to the cosmic side with Thor Ragnarok, and we get to see where Hulk went at the end of Age of Ultron, as well as what becomes of Thor and the Asgardians, which happens immediately before the events of Infinity War. But before we get there, we come back to Ant-Man for another small story, pun still intended, in Ant-Man and the Wasp. When we end the film with Scott trapped in the quantum realm and the others dusted, we're left with questions unanswered. And now we come to the climactic and inevitable finale of all of the preceding films, the Infinity War. We now watch Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. If you're so inclined, you can watch the Captain Marvel post-credit scene after the Infinity War end credit scene, but both are largely unnecessary since Endgame reintroduces us to Carol Danvers just fine. All of the preceding threats, arcs, and stories lead here, and these films wrap them all together into a climax that is fitting of the 11 years and 22 films it took to get here. So that's my take on the entirety of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. What do you think? Do you have a special viewing order you think works well? Drop a comment or at me on the social medias because I love talking about stuff like this. If you want to see the channel grow, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. I'd like to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative. Actually, I'm wearing a Punisher shirt, so it'd probably be more appropriate to go, "You're one bad day away from being me!"